Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome in the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle, that's at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Obviously, today looks a little bit different than what we are normally accustomed to because I'm not in the minutes as we normally go through. It's going to be much more sort of abbreviated. We're going to cut things down. We won't have any sort of Breeders' Cup top 5 this week, but that'll come back next week in full force, just simply because there's too many things going on. The boys are back in the studio, making sure everything looks good, and I don't want to put too much on them, just simply because the difference between Maine and New York City is quite significant. So we figure we'll just try to keep this as bare bones as possible. We'll still have some visuals if you're watching along live with us, or if you watch the podcast on YouTube. And speaking of that, you've got YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, many ways for you to find the show if you are so inclined. And again, today is September the 29th. Tomorrow is a big day of racing. Obviously, it's opening day today at Santa Anita, the great race place, and it's opening weekend. The big news, though, at Santa Anita tomorrow, 5 Grade 1s, all of them figure to be very key preps as far as the Breeders' Cup is concerned, and we've only got 4 or 5 weeks left before that happens down at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club. So a lot of good things going on at Santa Anita tomorrow, as well as Belmont Park. You've got a number of graded stakes races, most notably the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic. We'll talk about one of the races at Belmont. We'll talk about 2 from Santa Anita here in a little bit. We'll wrap things up as we always do with some NFL picks. Hopefully we can continue on some positive momentum from last week, where I feel like I got a little bit jobbed. And if I feel like I got jobbed by the Lions game, I can't imagine how the players or any of the fans for the Detroit Lions feel. We'll get to that in a little bit, though. Let's start off with a little bit of a review from last week. Obviously, Parks was the focal point of the entire racing world because you had the Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby, you had the Grade 1 Cotillion, you also had the Gallant Bob. All of those races for 3-year-olds in different sort of variations. The boys were going a mile and an eighth in the Pennsylvania Derby, the Cotillion for fillies, mile and 16th, and the Gallant Bob was 6 furlongs on the main track again for 3-year-olds. Let's start off with the Pennsylvania Derby, and the boys in the studio, they can throw up the replay right now of West Coast going out and strutting his stuff. He earns a 107 Beyer speed figure, winning the Pennsylvania Derby on the heels of a 108 Beyer in the Travers most recently. Now sort of the question becomes a number of things. First and foremost, as far as 3-year-old title, 3-year-old champion is concerned, is this enough to unseat Always Dreaming, who was the leader in the clubhouse, the de facto 3-year-old champion, simply because he won the biggest race for 3-year-olds, the Kentucky Derby? I don't know that it necessarily makes him a slam dunk, West Coast, but at the same time, I think right now we all have a recency bias. And the voters for the Eclipse Awards are no different than anyone else. Then recency does matter. And the fact that Always Dreaming did nothing over the course of the summer, and he's going to go away until he comes back, hopefully as a 4-year-old. The fact that Cloud Computing did absolutely nothing. He'll come back as a 4-year-old after a bit of an ankle surgery, I believe, or a knee chip, one of the two. You can find that on drf.com. And Tapwrit is gone with a foot injury coming out of the Travers. West Coast, he wins the Travers, which is a major, obviously, Grade 1 race for 3-year-olds. And then he comes back with the newly minted Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby. Right now, I think it's very difficult to make an argument against West Coast for a 3-year-old champion. Now, if you just want to say it's strictly accomplishment, as far as the Grade 1s are concerned, right now he is on par with Always Dreaming. The difference is people weight the Kentucky Derby and the Florida Derby probably more so than they would the Travers and the Pennsylvania Derby. I'm of the opinion that you also have to factor in what they did after those sort of accomplishments. And I suppose you can knock West Coast for not running in any of the Triple Crown races. But at the same time, if Always Dreaming had done any running in any of those races, I would be a little bit more kind and a little bit more willing to give him another look. I think West Coast right now is your leader as far as the 3-year-olds are concerned in the 3-year-old Eclipse Award. As far as the Breeders' Cup is concerned, a lot of people are looking at him, and he's a bit of a buzz horse as far as Breeders' Cup Classic is concerned. I don't know that I'm ready to go in just that far right now. We talked about it a little bit on Weekend Wrap, myself and Dan Illman. I didn't like the fact that he changed leads early. I know some people don't buy into lead changes or anything like that. That's your prerogative. I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. I'll just say it's usually not a positive when they change early. Now, maybe it was something as simple as he was just bored out there and he thought, there's no one else running with me and I'm just simply far superior. Maybe he got a little bit goofy. I don't love to see things differently than I've seen in the past. When a horse is, look, he was brilliant in Travers. He went out there and he did everything professionally. He'd done everything professionally in the Los Alamitos Derby. He did everything professionally in the Easy Goer. And then all of a sudden, this is a little bit different where he changes early. I'm always looking for a little thing that's going to kind of tweak one way or the other for positive or for a negative. To me, this is not a positive. And the fact that it just feels like if all of this sort of steam and momentum continues to build for people that love him, I don't know. I don't look at him as some sort of a true contender right now for the Breeders' Cup Classic. From a figure standpoint, he is much, much too slow as far as buyers are concerned. From a time form standpoint, he's not that far off. The 132s and 133s that he's earned, that puts him right in the same ballpark as a horse like an Arrogate or a Gun Runner or even a Collected. But I don't know. I'm personally not ready to put him in sort of a real race with those top three horses, those top three older horses. We'll find out as we get a little bit closer if they all train on and they all get to dance in the Breeders' Cup Classic. As far as the 3-year-old fillies are concerned, we're going to take a look right now at the Grade 1 Cotillion. And this was a fascinating race simply because you had almost a replay of the Coaching Club American Oaks with Mike Smith making just this big, big sweeping move down the backside. And now as they're coming down the lane, Abel Tasman made her move down on the inside. The problem was what some people believe was inside dead. Was the rail not the place to be Saturday afternoon at Parks? And you see it Tiswell. She eventually angled out and she got the job done with a beautiful trip and a beautiful ride from Drayden Van Dyke. I am of the opinion that the inside was not that bad. It could not have been that bad, considering you had Abel Tasman make that just crazy move down the backside, down on the inside. If the rail was dead, she wouldn't have been close at the end of the finish. She only lost by what, a length and a half, something like that. If the rail was dead, she would have had absolutely no chance to be that close. I also look at it, and we'll talk about the next race momentarily, but there were enough other horses that ran on the inside portion of the track. And I know people just kind of get enamored with seeing that move coming off the far turn and seeing where horses are, whether they're 3, 4, 5 paths off the rail. You got to watch the entirety of the replay or the entirety of the race. Some of these other horses earlier on in the card, they were down on the inside. And then when they turned for home, as you normally do, they angled out to the 3 or 4 path and they made their move and they continued on with it. That doesn't mean that the inside was bad. That just means that more often than not, you're not going to be able to go up the wood. You're going to need to angle out into the clear to make your run. I don't think the inside was that bad. Again, bias is one of those things, very, very subjective. Some people are going to look at it and say it was absolute death. Other people are going to look at it like myself and say, I don't get it. I don't think it was that bad at all. Again, we'll find out when these horses decide to come back. Does this loss affect Abel Tasman as far as 3-year-old champion is concerned with fillies? My opinion, it does not. I think she is still head and shoulders the leader in the clubhouse as far as that division is concerned. Now, we'll find out if she goes on to the Breeders' Cup Distaff. It Tiswell, I still think, is the most underrated horse that we have really going at this point. All she does is go out and run good races. She ran so well in the Alabama 2 starts back, and then she came back and followed it up with this effort here down in Pennsylvania. I think she's very, very underrated. That doesn't mean that I think she is better or, let's say, a more deserving champion as far as 3-year-old Eclipse is concerned with the filly division. I think it's still Abel Tasman, the Kentucky Oaks, the Acorn, the CCA Oaks, and a second-place finish in the Cotillion. To me, that still outweighs what It Tiswell has done. Now, who's to say? Maybe It Tiswell, maybe she can continue on with this good form, and if they decide to go to the distaff, Jerry Hollendorfer has been non-committal to that, and I have to be honest, if it were me, not that it is, and not that they care what I think, I would not go to the distaff. I don't think she's quite of that caliber right now. I think everything just worked out perfectly for her in that spot. We'll find out where they decide to go. If Abel Tasman goes, I think she's a nice horse. I don't know that she's quite as good as a Stellar Wind or someone of that mold, a Forever Unbridled. Heck, of the 3-year-olds, I don't even know if she's technically the best. She's certainly the most accomplished, but I think Elate would have something to say about the idea of Abel Tasman being the best 3-year-old or the most likely 3-year-old to win a race like the Distaff should they all decide to get there and train on. We'll find out. Another fascinating race potentially down the road, the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Let's move on to the 3-year-old boys. They went 6 furlongs in the Gallant Bob. This was a tremendous stretch duel between 2 of the favorites in this spot. You have on the inside Coal Front for Todd Pletcher, the outside American Pastime for Bob Hess and Kent DeSormo. And it looks like American Pastime is going to go on with the full momentum. He changes leads. Took him a little while to get over there, but Coal Front would not be denied. Now, this continues on with the trend and the idea that if the inside was bad, there is no chance that Coal Front wins this race. And not only did he win the race, he actually extended again at the end. And if you believe that outside was where you wanted to be, then this must have been a horrific performance from American Pastime because that's where he was for the entirety of the race. He broke a little bit slow. Kent angled him out 4-5 path, and he hung out in the clear the entire way. Again, it's a very, very subjective thing. If you believe that it was bad, that's on you. If you don't believe it was bad, that's on you as well. I can't make a decision for you, and I can't sway you one way or the other. I don't think the inside was bad. You go back and watch the replays. I don't think inside was bad. If it was, Cole Front would not have been able to do what he did in that spot right there. Now, the bad news coming out of that race. He unfortunately was injured. It may or may not be a situation where it's career threatening, but at the same time, there is a scenario where we may not see him race again. That would be very, very unfortunate, especially since this horse looks like he could be anything as far as a sprinter is concerned. But at the end of the day, those are things that happen in this game. And if he can't go on as far as racing is concerned, hopefully we get to see him be a stallion and stand somewhere and do some good things and produce some good offspring. Let's move into a handicapping preview segment of this entire thing here on the Matt Bernier Show as we continue on. Again, as you can see, this is not the normal setup for those of you that are watching live or you're listening or following along podcast in whichever fashion it is. Let's take a look. We're going to start off with the first race that we'll look at. One of two from Santa Anita we'll take a look at. It's the Awesome Again. Let's throw up that field if we could, boys, back in New York. As far as the odds are concerned, because my travel got as screwed up as it did last night, you don't have any odds of my odds, but I'm going to run them down for you in post position order. The number one, Win This Space, 49-1. The 2 is Dortmund. Dortmund is going to scratch from this spot in favor of a softer return. I cannot blame the connections at all for that. The number 3 is Midnight Storm, 6-1. 4, Curlin Rules, 7-1. The 5 is Breaking Lucky, 9-2. The 6, Mubtahij, 4-1. The 7, Donworth, 6-1. And the 8 is Cupid at 4-1. Again, those are my odds. What I think is fair value on all of these runners. To be honest with you, I don't think this is a particularly strong race. I won't be surprised at all if you get any number of results in here. The one thing that would probably really surprise me would be a horse like Win the Space winning this one simply because of the form that he's in. But if you're looking for a live long shot, how about Donworth? We're going to take a look at Donworth's effort 2 starts back. This was in the San Diego handicap down at Del Mar. And I understand he got his doors blown off by Accelerate. But guess what? Accelerate is a really, really talented racehorse. And I don't know that that was any sort of poor effort from this horse. I think Donworth, with the addition of blinkers, I think he's got a giant, giant chance in here. Because really, when you look at his overall form and his page, it's not like he's that far behind some of these other runners. And if you think he's always just been a little bit on the green side, a little bit on the dopey side, maybe the blinkers going on, maybe that sharpens him up and gets him to wake up a little bit. You look at some of his buyers, he's already earned a triple digit in the past. He's this year alone, he's earned 97 buyer, 2 starts back in that race we just took a look at, a 123 time form U.S. rating. You add the blinkers. If you think there's any forward move, Donworth is an interesting runner. He's my live long shot in the Awesome Again. He's also my pick in the Awesome Again. Let's move on to the Rodeo Drive. They're going to go 1.25 miles on the turf. This is for fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. And it's going to be an interesting race. Again, this is traditionally a big-time prep for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare turf, and it will again be a prep for the Filly and Mare turf. The difference is this race is normally run at a more conventional distance, 1.25 miles, 1.3 miles. This year it will be run at 1.1 miles because for the first time the Breeders' Cup is at Del Mar. So again, let's take a look at this field. This is race number 9 at Santa Anita in post position order. The number 1, Frenzified, 49-1. The 2, Goldie Esponi, 19-1. The 3, Responsible for Love, 12-1. The 4, Majestic Heat, 13-1. The 5 is Avenge for Rich Mandela, 6-1. The 6 is Ambicelli, 49-1. The 7, Beau Recall, 9-1. 8, Decked Out, 6-1. 9, Kiss Me Now, 24-1. Goodyear for Roses rounds out your field. I've made her the 9-5 most likely winner of this race, and I don't really think there is any question that she is the most likely winner of this race based on her overall body of work. You look at the speed figures. She has a number of triple digits on her page. You look at her from a time form standpoint. She has the highest last out time form U.S. rating as well as the highest last out buyer in the field. I think Goodyear for Roses is very clearly the most likely winner of this race. But my pick in a live long shot here is a horse drawn just 2 stalls to her inside. That's Decked Out for Keith and Kent DeSormo. We're going to take a look back at both of these horses, their most recent race. They came out of the John C. Maybe. And the interesting thing, depending on when you're seeing this replay, Decked Out, she had a hold down on the inside, and she got a little bit uncomfortable, and she threw her head about. And you heard Keith DeSormo afterwards say Kent was a little bit upset with her because if she had gone through that hole, she would have had an opportunity. And you can see, obviously, Goodyear for Roses, she put in a good bid late, considering that wide outside post coming out of the chute at Del Mar. I thought she ran very, very well first off the bench. Decked Out There's a couple things though. She was much closer to the pace than she's normally accustomed to being. I wonder if she was just a little bit keen, a little bit eager to go coming off the long layoff. We hadn't seen her since New Year's Eve of 2016. I wonder now if you get her back into that sort of mid-pack toward where you relax, make her that one run. I don't think the distance is a problem at a mile and a quarter. The jury is out. Maybe she does appreciate some cut in the ground. She clearly isn't going to get that Saturday afternoon at Santa Anita, but I think she's an interesting one at a big, big number. I made her 6-1. I expect her to go off in that 10-1 range again, as she was in the John C. Maybe. I don't know. I picked her. I don't know that she's as talented as a horse like Goodyear for Roses, but I'll give her a shot in the Rodeo Drive, acknowledging, though, Goodyear for Roses strictly the horse to beat here, and one, don't immediately rule her out come Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf time when you're handicapping that race. Talking about turf races, let's take a look at the third and final race that we'll go over here this week. We'll go to Belmont Park, go back to New York. Mile and 16th on the inner turf. It's the Grade 3 Pilgrim for 2-year-olds, $200,000 the purse. It's a really interesting field. It's not a big field, but I think there are a number of ways you can go in here. Let's take a look at the entry card, and I will run it through in post-position order with my odds. Number 1, Desert Stone for Rudy Rod and Zayat Stables, 8-1. You go to number 2, Morrison, 19-1. Stolen Pistol, 19-1. Shoke, 6-1 for Todd Pletcher and Donegal Racing. The 5 is Voting Control for Chad and Javier, 3-1. Morad, 7-2 for Todd and Johnny V. The 7 is Looking Ready, 19-1. And the 8 is Valuator for Michael Dilger and Joel Rosario, 6-1. A fascinating race because you've seen some good things from these 2-year-olds already. You've seen some serious greenness, particularly from a horse like Desert Stone down on the inside. I think he's a serious runner, but he just has no idea what he's doing right now. Another horse that doesn't really know what he's doing right now, I think, is the number 4, Shoke. He's going to be my live long shot. We're going to take a look at the With Anticipation. This was his most recent start up at Saratoga. The big thing is he was stuck in behind a wall of horses. He finally angled out. He finished really, really well. You just look at the overall pedigree. The Scat Daddies, again, unfortunately, we don't have Scat Daddy anymore because he passed away earlier this year. But you look at the Dam. The Dam was a half to a Fleet Alex. And Todd puts the blinkers on this horse, and I think that could be just, the end-all, be-all here for this one. It just needs to be a little bit sharper, a little bit more professional. You look at him out on the racetrack, he looks like a hulk of a horse for a 2-year-old. I know a lot of people are going to look at it and be turned off that Johnny V chooses the other Pletcher in here. Guess what? You don't lose a heck of a lot with Luis Saez, and I don't necessarily look at that as a negative. We've talked about it so many times. You read too much into the whole rider thing, the musical chairs game. You're going to end up kind of hurting yourself in the long run. Shoke, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Shoke, Seabhac. My live long shot, my pick in the Grade 3 Pilgrim tomorrow afternoon at Belmont Park, one of 4 graded stakes races. All of them figure to be big-time preps for the Breeders' Cup. And again, we talked about the 5 grade ones out at Santa Anita tomorrow afternoon. All of them preps for the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar in a few weeks here. 12-17 on the east, 9-17 on the west. The Matt Bernier Show. We're going to wrap things up with a quick NFL Week 4 trifecta. Last week, again, I feel like I got jobbed on the Detroit Lions game. I felt like they were the better team, just considering the way that entire game went. The Falcons, they're still very, very good. Don't get me wrong. I know I've been kind of down on them a little bit, but at the same time, I do think that the Lions are a team you're going to want to keep an eye on. So that changes the record. The first week really killed us with the 0-3 week, but we're 3-6. If we can run the table here, we're back to 500 through the first 4 weeks, and we continue to build on that. Let's start off Titans at the Texans. Texans +2, giving the points at home. The Texans should have beat my Patriots last weekend. I don't know what the heck's going on with the Patriots, but they just don't look like the team that we saw last year, or really any team that we've seen recently from Belichick and company. The Texans, I don't think they're that bad. I think Deshaun Watson continues to show that he can actually do some things. DeAndre Hopkins got a little bit of a banged-up knee, but I'm not too worried about that. It sounds like he's just on the sort of injury report simply because he's resting. They're not going to overdo it with him during the week. They go back home. It's going to be one of those big emotional things as well. I'd like to think that the Texans, this is a better team now. I know it sounds silly after 3 weeks than when we saw them face the Jaguars earlier in the year in the first week of the season. And guess what? The Jags have actually proven that they're actually a decent team. So give me the Texans at home +2. Excuse me, against the Titans. The Eagles at the Chargers. Chargers -1.5. The LA Chargers. Give me the home team laying the points, laying 1.5. The Chargers might be the best 0-3 team in the league. The Eagles, I'm not disputing what they're capable of. I think they're a good team. It's just one of those things. You're going to go west. You're going to get a Chargers team at home that needs a win desperately. If they don't win this game, they're in deep, deep water as far as the division is concerned. But I think there's some talent there. Phillip Rivers, he's got to get his act together because I think he just alternated pick, interception, pick, pick, touchdown last weekend. Got to have to clean that up a little bit. But they've got some ability, the Chargers. I don't love them, But I think this is one of those instances where desperate teams, they need a win this week. Not saying that the Eagles couldn't use a win, but the Chargers absolutely have to win this week. Lay the 1.5 at home with the LA Chargers. In the third and final game, the Redskins at the Chiefs. Give me the Redskins +7. I liked Washington last Sunday night. They get the job done. They look like a really, really good team, but I think that was a combination of things. I think there's something seriously wrong with Oakland. I don't know what it is, but I think something's up. Amari Cooper keeps dropping the football. That's got to have to change at some point here pretty quickly. But the Redskins, I think they're better than people are giving them credit for. And I know going into Arrowhead, Kansas City looks like the best team in the NFL right now. I still think Washington can keep it. I don't know if they can win the game outright, but I think they can certainly cover the 7-point spread. So give me the Redskins +7 on the road. On Monday night, a quick recap: Titans at Texans. Give me the Texans +2. Eagles at Chargers. Give me the Chargers at home, laying 1.5. And Redskins at Chiefs Monday night. Give me Washington +7, 3-6 on the year. Hopefully we can get back to 500 or somewhere close to that. As far as the picks are concerned, it is 12:20 here on the East. We're going to wrap this thing up. A couple things though before we do. Again, if you're watching live.drf.com, livestream.com, Twitter or Facebook for the Racing Form social media pages. Thank you for doing so. Check it out in the podcast version, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. Later this afternoon, Peter Thomas Fornatal and Jonathan Kinchin, the hosts of the DRF Players podcast, they are going to have some sort of a live tournament, and it's going to be kind of following along as you go. You can head on over to DRF Tournaments, sign up for this, I believe, still. And the idea is if you beat Jonathan, it's essentially a free roll. If Jonathan beats you guys, well, you're going to lose. And I don't know how that whole thing works. Those boys can obviously dive into the rules there. That's something you're going to want to take a look at, though, not only on live.drf.com, because that will be live here coming up this afternoon, but you're going to head over to DRF Tournaments. If you've never played, no better time than now to get involved, especially, again, you have a good day, you beat JK, you get a free roll out of this thing. So nothing wrong with going on with that, but definitely check out the boys' DRF Players podcast coming up later on this afternoon. As always with this show, we're going to throw it right into Out of the Gate. Thank you for bearing with me here in the makeshift studio. Next week will be a much more normal situation. We'll be back in the studio in New York City. We'll go through things. Opening weekend at Keeneland, a lot of good things coming up down there. Good luck this weekend, wherever you're playing, whatever you're playing, however you're playing. And again, on a weekend, the first weekend since the entire IRS tax thing has been pushed through. So hopefully you all have some big scores and you can make a couple more bucks as opposed to giving it off to the government at this point. So fingers crossed. Good luck. Best of luck. We'll talk again next week. Without further ado, Out of the Gate.